4 years on from then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull promising to review religious freedoms off the back of the same-sex marriage debate, but never delivering, it's now Prime Minister Scott Morrison who'll personally introduce revised religious discrimination legislation to Parliament tomorrow. Now, it's been a topic of much contention, and one major question being raised is, how will the government get the balance right? Have they got the balance right? To discuss this and more, I'm joined by the Australian's foreign editor, someone who's written 2 best-selling books about religion, in particular Christianity, Greg Sheridan. Greg, I'm going to get you on next week to go back into your book as we head into Christmas, but on the issue of religious freedom, you've had a close look at it. Have the government got the balance right here?
Well, Peter, I hate to equivocate here, but I was very persuaded by your column in The Australian last week that it would be better if we didn't need this bill because it's better to be free to do everything that you're not forbidden to do rather than just to have a few freedoms defined. I agree with the thrust of that argument. However, I think that anti-religious legislation, particularly in Victoria, is becoming so pernicious that I do think there is now a strong case for some sort of legislative shield. Now, one of the things this will provide for is that religious schools can hire their co-religionists if they wish. Now, I've been involved with 1 million Catholic schools. They always have some non-Catholic teachers and they always have plenty of non-Catholic students. But a religious school, be it Catholic or Islamic or Evangelical or anything else, has to be able to hire a certain core of its own co-religionists in order to teach its own faith. Now, you would think this is just common sense, but the need for this kind of legislation is a sign of the breakdown of common sense in our society. So in protecting that right, I think it's good, and in protecting the right of making a normal religious statement, it's good. Of course, it's hampered by other limitations, but on the other hand, it would protect something like Archbishop Porteous in Tasmania, making his very, very gently worded statement in favour of the traditional view of marriage, and then being, taken to the Anti-Discrimination Board in Tasmania because of that. So you would think prima facie it would protect that. So there's some advance in it, I think.
The IPA have come out today in a statement. They say it's too vague. I listened carefully to Trent Zimmerman. He's a left-wing Liberal in the seat of North Sydney. He reserves his right to cross the floor, which of course he's entitled to do. He's absolutely entitled to do that as a coalition backbencher. Beyond just the Parliament dealing with this, sending it off to a Senate committee and bringing it back, how do you think this will play out with the coalition supporter base? I mean, is it going to win friends for them or will it lose friends?
Look, I think it's helpful, but I think the fact that it has been done at the last minute will make people very cynical. I mean, it's almost set up to fail, isn't it? It's inconceivable that it can get back from a committee and voted on and passed and so on before the next election. So it's more or less set up so the government can say it tried. In a lot of those Western Sydney seats, which are, going to be critical in this next election, the religious vote is quite strong. Those are the seats that voted no in the same-sex marriage plebiscite. And let me say, as someone who advocated a yes vote in the same-sex marriage plebiscite, but I strongly believe that religious institutions ought to be free to teach their faith. And so Trent Zimmerman certainly has the right to cross the floor if he wants to, but I think the encroachment on religious freedom is quite real. And lower middle class Bible-based Christians, people who are attached to Catholic schools, and religious people in Western Sydney from all religious traditions, Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, whatever, I think would be more inclined to support a government which tries to do this kind of legislation. Whether, in Wentworth or North Sydney that will make people turn against the government, I think that's pretty unlikely. So I think it's a small net plus for the government.
I think the motivation for Labor will be not to have this voted on before the election because those seats you referenced, beyond Wentworth and North Sydney, but that swathe out there in Western Sydney, parts of Melbourne, parts of Queensland, many of those seats are Labor seats. So if Labor in the chamber voted against this legislation, it would retail very badly for them. in pockets in those seats, not the whole seat, but in pockets of those seats. And I think that's where they'll try and avoid, basically have their cake and eat it too, if Labor can push it out in a Senate inquiry.